What is up, grinders? Welcome back to another episode of the MMA Crunch Time before lock. A little bit early for this UFC Brazil, back in Brazil. I have to say, John, leading into this card, we had 13 fights. It was going to be a lot more fun, a lot more combinations. But now we're down to 11 and a bunch of weight misses. Something's up in Brazil. And I think the narrative is going to be home cooking. It happens every time we go to Brazil.
It happens pretty much every time we leave the country. It was like the Canadian fighters. No offense to Canada, to anyone producing the show, but like the Canadian fighters, I think went like 6-0 in the Canadian fights. I think was it Abu Dhabi? I feel like they did pretty well. Paris card. I mean, there is something to be said. There's a home court advantage in every sport. I put that in one of my write-ups today. But a lot of it has to do with travel and, being in your home country, being somewhere where you speak the language. So I think the Brazilian fighters, and there is one of them at least one in every single fight on the card. That's something to keep in mind. I think it's probably been baked into the lines for the most part, like to the money lines. But I don't even know if that's always the case. I do think there might, I see foreign fighters win in their home country more often than it seems like the lines would even indicate, I'm a guy that usually lets Vegas dictate my DFS choices.
Me as well. I think that I let them do the homework for me, right? Just like you do. And it's the best way to get that, the edge on the competition. But make sure you guys are smashing the like button. Tell a friend, be a friend. This show is going to give you a lot of context to the slate. And I'm going to give you my thoughts. I kind of made a short list, John, of how I evaluated this slate, and I want to see where you want to take it right away, okay? The first thing I said, home cooking. I think there's a lack of pure underdogs. With the context of the slate, like I said, there are some Brazilian underdogs, so I think I'd gravitate towards them first. And then the possibility that a loser might actually hit 50 points, something like that. Like there's going to be some target fights that have high action. I think almost every single fight has high action. And then I think right away you have to say main event squash match. That context alone really puts a wrinkle into this slate. So are those kind of these are the points that I'm kind of breaking down this slate with. Is that kind of the same thought process you do?
Yeah, actually, I do. I think it's going to be pretty action-packed, and it is still going to be a pretty fun card. I think we lost the Ismail Bonfim fight. That was going to be probably a pretty good action one. And we lost another fight, the Hugo, right?
Yes, that Marcos was another, Hugo, right? Yeah, with a live underdog potential.
Yeah, so we did lose a couple of fights. We still have some pretty good action fights left. And the main event should be fun. It might not last long, but it'll be fun. I think it's a long shot to enter the second round. So that'll be a fun one. I mean, it does take away some of the combinations DFS wise, but there's still some pretty interesting game theory elements. Like we've seen the last couple of months, some major long shots. Like the biggest, I think we had 2 cards in a row where the biggest underdog won. And there's always some kind of weird circumstances there. With the one, it was punches to the back of the head. The guy was getting mauled so badly. The other fighter accidentally just kept hitting him in the back of the head, and that's something you can't do. He should know that. He was warned, but he was basically could just punch him wherever he wanted and just accidentally hit him in the back of the head. But that went down as a medical disqualification loss. So again the biggest underdog won. I'm pretty sure it was 2 cards in a row, and so we're seeing it again. The biggest underdogs never have ownership that is up to their implied probability odds, but they win. Those odds are there for a reason, right? The biggest underdogs are always underowned. It just takes a while for them to win a fight. They don't always win. The bottom 3 fighters don't always win on every card.
Stylistically, the main event, I mean, that's the starting point for me, and I'm a type of guy that doesn't mind going out on a limb. But Derek Lewis is hard to get behind, man. He just, 130 miles an hour, got pulled over. I mean, I don't know if he's necessarily in here for a paycheck. What the hell is going on with him? But listen, you can't ignore that he can literally knock anybody out at any time. And he's gone deep into fights before. He carries the power. Jalton Almeida, what have we seen? That amount of fight tape, and that's all he needs to get in and out. So, I mean, I understand stylistically. We've seen the hole in Lewis getting taken down. I think this fight looks more like Daniel Cormier take him down and just submit him, get him out of there, than it does like a Curtis Blades where he goes for a takedown and gets knocked out. Like, but you can't get like 0%. If you're doing 150 lineups and you're fading Derek Lewis, I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, and I'll say that but this is Lewis's third fight this year. And the first one against Sergey Spivak was the worst thing I've ever seen. And it was the fight that it was back in February. It was the fight that had everybody like checking their DK lineups, right? And everybody's talking on Twitter like Lewis's points haven't gone up yet, but it was just he scored 0 points, like no significant strikes, no like nothing, no control time, like, and I think it went to like pretty deep into the first round. And Spivak got the first round win, but Lewis literally did nothing. And the fight before that, he put up less than two DK points, right? Like those are two really bad losses. So going into his last fight, which was like just back in July, it was like this guy scored less than 2 DK points in his last 2 fights combined. Like he's a huge underdog, and then he pulled off the first round win. So it's always tough to know like what's going to happen, like what to expect from Derek Lewis. He can clearly get the job done, but I mean, yeah, he's a massive underdog, but he's at least priced for it, right? Like we don't always even see $6,600 fighters on DK
that has knockout at any time.
Yeah, and like so Almeida's got like a better than 50% chance of a first round win, but it's an interesting like thought. Like, what if it's the other 45%? What if this is like more competitive than we think? And like, can Lewis lose and end up on the winning lineup? Because like 6,600 is not just a low salary, but there's like actually a $200 gap between like him and Ruiz Montserrat, and a $300 difference between like Lewis and Dalby. So I don't know. It's possible that even Lewis, even though like we expect it to be a huge action, like quick fight, if it's not, like there's a possibility even Lewis ends up on the winning lineup in a high scoring loss.
I actually 100% agree, but it's just really hard to get behind because it's going to be takedowns. Lewis, to me, is actually a gift for like a fighter like Almeida because he's got the oh shit, got to get up button. He just hits this button and he gets the hell up, which means that he's going to be rinse, repeat takedowns. So I think that there's actually sneaky more of a floor and ceiling for Almeida than almost ever before because we've seen him averaging 116 points. I'd be surprised if he doesn't get 105 in any sort of win. But we spent a hell of a lot of time on the main event. There's a money line type of play there in the mid-range. You interested in Mr. Brenner? And 40% ownership is a little bit terrifying for a guy whose best attribute tends to be his durability. I understand why you're getting 65% money line equity at 8,200. I think he's going to be an instant click for people. Is that a mistake? Because I almost feel like he could score 70 points in a win. He could score 85 because, Fight Metric gives you all these little strikes. Well, how are you handling this one? Because I think that's another context of the slate that's very, very important.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I actually went back and forth on this when I was doing my lineups, and I'm basically ending up a little bit under our projected ownership with like a little bit less even in my like higher dollar like qualifier type stuff. Just because I think he could be overowned. Like I think that 41% is probably pretty accurate, but it could be higher. I'd guess it would be higher if it's not on that 41%. And so you're getting a good amount of leverage on the field. I don't know a lot about his opponent. It's a short notice replacement, which is why the salary is a little bit off on Brenner. I don't know. I'm overweight on the opponent. Just not knowing anything about him.
You have to be. I think from a GPP standpoint, there's a lack of win equity. There's a lack of ceilings, and I think you can bet into a couple spots on this card. That's one of them, right? That's one where you can get some leverage, half the ownership on a guy, it's going to be a competitive fight. I think 2 Brazilians in that spot, Koreski and Brenner. So I do agree with you on that one, but there's a guy right below him. I mean, this guy comes out like a bat out of hell. Fernandez, he sets the tone for the whole entire slate, in my opinion. First fight of the night against Mark Diakiese. We joke Mark D1 Diakiese. Neither of us tagged Mr. Diakiese, but I would not be surprised if he's one of the lower owned favorites that puts up like 110 points and exposes. But I think Fernandez is going to give him a true test in the first round. What the hell does this thing look like in the second and third? If Diakiese gets like spam takedowns, pitter patter, my concern is Diakiese isn't like a pure finisher, right? Like I'd rather him go out there and finish for my money. I'm more up to take a shot on Fernandez with 7,600 first round equity. My problem is 25% ownership. You and I know that's going to be higher than 25%.
Yeah, I'm overweight both these guys because I think it could be a high scoring fight. We don't know. It's kind of the weird fight, and the reason I in particular want to be overweight on it is because I think it could be high scoring without getting that early finish. Like DKC can get a bunch of takedowns, so if he is getting those rinse and repeat takedowns, that's the highest scoring thing that we see in DK scoring is those repeat takedowns. And sometimes you get control time, but yeah, if you just get those, 1-2 takedowns a minute or whatever, that adds up real fast. And DKC's maybe not the best fighter in the UFC, but he's put up more than 100 points twice without getting a finish. And there's actually not a lot of fighters that have that style. So even though he's not the best at it, I think people might look at him and think oh, he's not that great, and he's maybe the least appealing of all the favorites, and he's got the lowest, one of the lower inside the distance lines of the favorites. So I'm going to skip over him, but you could be getting a ton of points for that price, even without the finish. It's just you just have to see how the fight goes, and so I'm overweight both sides.
He probably needs to dominate to win in Brazil. The tone's going to be set. These Brazilian fans are going to be in the stands going, "Ooh, vamos here," from the get-go, right? So this is why I really do think, if there was live DFS, I'd keep this one out of the slate. Let me see if the home cooking starts early, right?
Yeah, I was actually wondering if that's an interesting way to bet the card is wait until the first fight, because I think it's likely to go to decision. See how even if DKC wins, what are the scorecards? If he has a dominant performance and it's a split win or something like that, maybe that gives you some indication of where you should be betting the rest of the card.
You and I talked about it before. There's not a huge amount of prize pools out there, but Showdown is a way that you can attack the live markets. Absolutely something you can attack. And what if I told you the crunch time is presented by FanDuel? Bet $5 on any money line, get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Plus, all customers get a profit boost every day for new users. And here comes the laundry list of states here: Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. That's my segue to using free bets and whatnot on the home cooking, right? That's the way that you exploit something, a promotional like that from the sponsor of the show, right, John?
Yeah, I think I've lived in at least 4 of those states. Now that I think about it. Anyway, neither here nor there. Yeah, exactly. Use some of those free bets. Shop around for the odds. FanDuel usually has one of the profit boosts, bets too. You can only bet up to so much, but usually they have appealing options on
an all Brazilian parlay.
Yeah. So it'll be So make sure you're using up the DraftKings or the FanDuel Sportsbook.
Of course. There's still a lot of contests out there, slowly filling up. But I mean, I like the demand. We're about an hour and 15 minutes out here, John, and things are filling. So that's a good sign. Where do you want to go from here? Because I think there's many ways. I think you can start talking about the women's fights that'll potentially be underlooked, but these have strong inside the distance lines for women's fights. Like typically we see, minus 350, minus 400 to go to a decision, right? We have Eduardo Miura as 27%, but her inside the distance last time I checked has gotten steamed. It was minus 165. It's like down to almost minus 200 inside the distance. A woman who missed weight and a woman who Montserrat Ruiz once broke a slate. This woman is not good. Hashtag not good. But my problem is she could probably stall out this fight. And I have major concerns if she does stall it out. But at the same time, then you look at the Denise Gomes and Hill fight. What does Hill fights usually look like? Volume-based decisions. That she actually sneaky has win equity on any time she fights because and fantasy relevance because she can hit 100, 150 plus significant strikes to get you to the promised land for fantasy. But the lack of grappling is a little bit of a concern in that particular fight for me. It's more of a finish-based for the Denise versus Angela. But Eduardo Miura versus Ruiz, man, that's ugly as ugly can be, and I love it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Mora missed weight. It was probably like an accidental, but could end up being strategic weight miss because she missed weight by a lot. And like the women's weight classes, I think it's like straw weight. Or the fight was supposed to be a straw weight.
If you click on her button on DraftKings, it says that it was her time of the month. She missed it because of that. So I don't know if it's an excuse, but 100% it could be strategic because she looks massive compared to Ruiz.
Yeah, it could help her out a lot. And like UFC has kind of been putting the thumb on these guys and ladies to like accept the fights, even if their opponent misses weight. For like I think we've seen that for a few months now, where like you've had some weight misses that was it 4 or 5 pounds. They could in other times maybe if we ended up with a canceled fight, and now the fight goes on. It does maybe make some sense for Ruiz, like if she's gonna probably lose anyway, she gets like 20% of the purse, right? So she gets more money to lose maybe than she would
on the way out. Let's be honest, she's not getting another fight after this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, unless she breaks the slate again, we don't know. But yeah, actually, I like the idea of being overweight more. I do think, like especially with Ismail Bonfim being out of the card now, you end up with like 3 fighters at the top: Jailton, Mora, and Gabriel Bonfim. And I think people are going to click on Jailton and Gabriel. And there's not a lot of combinations you can make that have all 3. Like you can do it, but it's I think you're like really limited on combinations, and those will be really highly owned, I think. So I like the idea of just like it's so hard to fade Jailton. But like maybe go Jailton and Mora instead of Jailton. I think more people are going to go Jailton Gabriel.
You might actually see more Jailton Fakhretdinov for that built-in grappling. And I only say that because people aren't going to look into the play that you and I both tagged at Zaleski's Dos Santos. And I mean, this guy literally is at home. I'm going to look into his takedown defense again because I feel like the guy is a veteran that makes everything somewhat close. Takedown defense is 65% over a huge sample size, John, and a positive striking differential. There's a lot of things in his back pocket that I like. I think he's long in the tooth. So UFC is saying, all right, we got a decent commodity in Fakhretdinov versus a veteran. And this is more of a true test where last time out, Liam on the Ground and Pound podcast, which you can get behind the paywall, was really, really saying, this is one of those spots where judging really comes into play if it gets stressed out. But this is a guy that we see a Russian that doesn't go for a million takedowns. Sometimes, well, he does. He's got hands now. But when he doesn't get the takedown, what does he look like? I mean, he's beaten nobody in the UFC. I mean, Kevin Lee, I guess, is a name, right? But he just came back, and we've never seen a person come back into the UFC and look that good.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we both have Zaleski Dos Santos tagged. I think he's the fighter like most likely to do that thing we talked about, which is end up on the winning lineup in a loss. Because 7,100 is still giving you a good amount of savings. And like the fighters priced below him, I have like pretty bad odds of a win. But yeah, I agree. Like any of these, like honestly, like the bottom 5 fighters, I think like 7,100 and below, maybe even like 7,200 and below. Like if any kind of win, because probably at most one of them will win, and then that like any kind of win puts them on the winning lineup. Yeah. So like all of those fighters, I'm interested. I think you need to, if you're multi-entering, own them at least at like the implied probability of a win for them. And so yeah, and Zaleski, I think he's the cheapest, like biggest underdog of the Brazilian fighters. And I think, you brought up a good point of like, what if this goes to decision? Like, I don't know. And we're not like, he's put up some huge scores in the past. But like, yeah, this is not necessarily a fight that's going to end within the distance. So what do the judges' scorecards look
People
like?
forget last time out, he upset a Russian in Abukar Nurmagomedov, who I think was one of the lower tier Nurmagomedov family-esque guys, but not a great scorer. But we're just looking for winners. And I actually think that Sneaky, as long as he's staying upright and not, knocked out or taken down, I think he could score over 3 rounds. And that's what I'm looking for on this slate, because I think you and I are clawing for something like that.
Yeah, and I like an 80-point win is probably pretty good for him. Like at 7,100. I have a couple of cheaper fighters tagged, like Derek Lewis. I think that's like if he wins, that's going to be high scoring. Like I think Lewis's like win equity is even higher in the first round than Almeida's, if that makes sense. Like Almeida has a better chance of winning in the first round, but relative to their overall chances of winning the fight at all, like Derek Lewis is probably first round or bust, I think. Whereas like Jailton has like more chances to win outside of the first round. So I think a Derek Lewis win puts him on the winning lineup. Nicholas Dalby is only like less than 10% owned. And that's a huge long shot. But if
What's
he wins,
done? What's he done before, though, John?
Yeah.
Don't bury the narrative. He's come to Brazil and upset the apple cart. I think actually more than once before. He is a guy who all of his fights tend to be close. And I feel like he sneaks out weird split decision type situations. So 100% agree with that tag.
Yeah, and like so, like I don't have like a ton of Nicholas Dalby, but in my 150 set, I think you need to own him at least at his win probability, because like you're also knocking out a huge amount of like Gabriel Bonfim lineups.
How is he 40%? I keep staring at that. That was one of the things that I'm like. It's not like Dalby's going to go out there and finish him. Let's somewhat be honest. Dalby's not a pure finisher. Could he? Yes, because Gabriel, the Bonfim brothers, what do? They come out hot. So we have like a trajectory of a Dalby guy who likes to go to like a split decision or a competitive striking based fight. And then we have a guy who comes out and tries to go for a finish in Bonfim. So it's kind of a weird dynamic in that spot. And I don't think Dalby will be single digit. There's just nowhere to go on this card.
I think Gabriel Bonfim is getting all of his brothers' ownership. Like seriously, because like I think they were priced right around each other. And so now you've got like a 9,600 Jailton, 9,400 Mora. I think Mora is going to be like kind of underowned. And because I think people are going to be like, oh, I can just save money. I can save 100 and click on Gabriel Bonfim. He's got like a better win probability inside the distance, better round one finish odds. It's like I think everybody's going to be in. I think there's going to be people that are, oh, Jailton's just like too expensive, but I can get almost as good of a fighter dropping down 300.
That's one way that I was thinking too, is if you fade Jalton and fade the main event strictly, you can build some lineups that actually still have decent upside without Almeida, but it's too damn easy to get to him. That's the problem, John. And there's a guy we haven't talked about right there. I mean, that does not score well long term. The fight goes deeper. Cal Baralho, man, this is one of the more odd fights in this range, right? Like you're talking about a guy who can absolutely out-grapple you, but he just doesn't finish. The guy just doesn't go for it. And I'd want a guy that goes for it, and he doesn't have what's our favorite thing, right? The little pitter-patter. This little like, all right, I'm gonna do it and then do some rear naked choke. Nope, that doesn't happen with him. It's more like, all right, I'll just control you on the mat, I'll hug you. And I feel like Magomedov, I talk about buy low spots quite often, for commodities. But last time out, they shot him to the moon. They said, here you go, buddy. Here's the main event spot against Strickland. Go take him out. What you do? He just goes out and gasses out. He looked decent in the first round, right? He hurt Strickland. Hands were pretty good. This is a decent buy low spot for Abus Magomedov. And I just feel like the stylistic, it's like Baralho will kill any fantasy relevance. He has to probably get a finish to pay off his salary. Well, to win the fight, period. I think Barajo's got all the tools to glue himself and get those takedowns to stall out any scoring ability from Magomedov.
So I'm overweight Barajo and underweight Abus.
You can't like it, right? You don't like that.
Yeah. Well, I think people are going to gravitate. I think people are going to be looking at the top 5 fighters, like in particular, like from Renat's like up, and people are going to want like 2 or 3. And I think the ones that are going to get a lot of ownership are Almeida, Gabriel Bonfim, and Renat. And so I'm just going with the other 2. Like, and I'm like trying to kind of basically be at the field with Jailton, just because like he can score well in basically every kind of win, and he's likely to get a win. He could definitely get a better 50% chance of first round win. We don't see that all the time. So he's the fighter I'm trying to be equal weight with, and I'm trying to be overweight on Mora, overweight on Barajo, underweight on Gabriel Bonfim. And it's just, we just don't know how the fight's going to be scored, right? Like, we don't know. I'm just always surprised when I look at my phone and we're waiting for the things to tally up, the final score, and they go from green to purple or whatever. I'm always like surprised with I always have no idea what the number is gonna be.
Who knows? Because we don't even know the people scoring it, but that's a talk for another day. You and I could go on for hours on that subject.
I've actually wondered if the fight metric people are local to the arena and local to the country, because there's sometimes seems to be a little bit of like home cooking there as well. And like, what is the definition of a significant strike versus a non-significant strike? Seems like very
subjective. Sports are subjective.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, very subjective.
A significant strike is when the strike itself is significant.
Thank you. Yes, yeah.
That's the Canadian definition.
Very black and white. So yeah, that difference is very subjective. So I figure we can kind of have a good idea of who has like what odds of winning. We have very little idea of who of the winners who has the good odds of putting up a really high score. And we're probably going to have 5 or 6 winners on the final winning lineup. So yeah, my thought process is try to find the winners that other people are underweight on because of their perceived like scoring ability.
You know what? There's 2 fights we really haven't talked about, and I actually am pretty terrified of both spots. Nascimento versus Mays is one of the ugliest heavyweight fights I've seen in a long time at low ownership. Okay, contextually, but these guys are both going to be about 25%, and it's because it's so ugly it's expected to go to a decision, Squirrel. And I'm more opt to not play it and be terrified. I was hoping it would be higher owned than 25 each. And then the other one, I mean, Rodolfo Vieira is a slight favorite in some spots at this stage, but he gasses out and then can give up points. And there's win equity for Petrosian. Honestly, I think there is, because we've seen Vieira gas out. I think finishing equity is on the side of Vieira, so he makes more sense out of all those guys I just talked about. But I think Nascimento might be interesting. Because you can't go anywhere. So what are people going to do? Oh, there's a heavyweight fight that's competitive, right? Mays? Is Mays going to be the guy? Like, how are you handling that heavyweight one? Because it kind of just blows my brain. Like, I don't know how to handle it.
I think like what you started off with, and it is basically what I'm doing. I'm underweight and scared. Because like, these heavyweight fights are always low scoring until they're not. And then say, that was a, for a 60-second win or whatever. And then somebody's putting up 120 points. I'm underweight and scared. Going to be counting down those first 60 seconons. But just
it's not high enough ownership. If it was like 40% for one of these guys, I'd be a little bit more happy.
Yeah, it's a fight that could score very poorly, and on a card where there could be a lot of high scores. And so for that reason, maybe I'm ending up more underweight this fight because I just want other fighters, relative to just not liking this fight. Because if you think of we could have a handful of first round finishes, that's what the odds are telling us. So even if Nascimento gets a first round finish, which isn't particularly high, I think it's less than 25%. He could end up not on the winning lineup, even though he's not one of the more expensive fighters. So like 8,800 is still pretty pricey because for
Last
somebody
last two fights, 59 points and 85. That's just simply not enough.
yeah.
And he got 3 takedowns against Bozer. Like, yeah, that's not good for Nascimento. There was actually a guy above him we haven't even talked about that actually I think is sneaky. He's got so much power in the hands, and now going for takedowns is Vitor Petrino. I mean, this dude is a somewhat surging prospect up the rankings, only 30%. I truly expect him to be higher owned. He was minus 110 inside the distance last time I checked. But Modestus Bukauskas, man, this guy's lucky to be back in the UFC. He sneaks out decisions. He's kind of the same mold as Nicholas Dalby, right? Just does some stuff and sometimes gets a split decision. And like he just doesn't do anything. Like I don't even know how you can roster him. He's got to hurt Petrino, get some respect. I also don't know how that fight necessarily busts because it seems like Vitor is going to be an aggressive type fighter long term. So
Yeah,
maybe that makes Modestus in play. Why did I just talk myself into that?
Don't talk yourself into it. I'm high on Vitor. He's one of my higher fighters on the card. 9,000 is just a really good price. Like compare like Petrino to Nascimento. There's only $200 difference. I'd rather find the $200 and play Petrino because he can he's probably going to score well. Another fighter who's put up more than 100 in a decision, right? Like those fighters don't come in every card, let alone having a couple of them on the same card. So I like Petrino because he's likely to win and he's likely to score well no matter what that win looks like. I'm going to end up being overweight on him. I agree. I think I'll probably see probably high 30s ownership. And then that's probably about where I'll own him. I think he's going to score well in a win. So, and he's not prohibitively expensive. He just fits in well in lineups.
Yeah, I like to kind of zag from that. Those builds you were talking about earlier, the Almeida jam in one of those top 5 from Renat up. I'm like, yes, he didn't group Petrino in there. We do have a question. Do you guys like Mays? I mean, he can go for takedowns. D1 Dontel Mays, right, John? I mean, he could stall out scoring. That's my major concern. Like if Nascimento gets a decision, there's a world where Dontel Mays scores control time. I swear to God, he could actually control him for a little bit, and Nascimento could get that home cooking type of deal.
Yeah, I
don't like him though. We don't like that fight.
Yeah, I'm underweight the fight. But I think I have more Mays than Nascimento. Just because it was 7,400, you don't have to do as much, right? If this does turn into the kind of ugly heavyweight fight that doesn't have a finish, Mays could end up on the winning lineup.
Mays was losing to Arlovsky last time. How fast people forget. Yeah. Oh yeah. He was losing the first round and then finally clipped him in the second. He barely even had the same significant strikes in that spot too. It was 25 to 24 strikes. His fights are close.
Yeah, I mean, I guess let me say if you have 7,400 left, and you're not playing Nascimento, then I think Mays is a fine selection. I probably like Mays better, at least probability wise, than all the fighters priced beneath him. So I would, if you have 7,400 left, I would plug in Mays and not sweat it, or 7,500. I think that's fine. I think Mays is fine. Just not necessarily going to score that well, but does at 7,400 doesn't need to.
Yeah, last spot, Rodolfo Vieira. How the hell are you handling one of the highest owned guys that's not in the super? Actually, he's a top 3. He's the 3rd highest owned guy from our projections, Rodolfo Vieira. And I think stylistically, this is a spot where it's going to take one back take. I feel like Petrosian is a guy that's a little bit expendable in the ranking system, right? He's not even ranked, but a Petrosian win might not even look that good. It probably looks more like Chris Curtis stopped the takedowns, pitter patter from distance. It's just somebody here should do well for their price tag because they're middle range and win equity, right? But I mean, justified 30 top 3 ownership for Vieira. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm a little bit under the field, but not a lot, and I'm over the field on Petrosian just because So I think there might be like it's basically a 50-50 flip fight. It's a coin flip, but because Vieira is a lot cheaper, or at least a few $100s cheaper, I guess $400 cheaper. The ownership on Vieira is like 3 times or 4 times that of Petrosian. So I'm trying to be a little bit over the field on Petrosian, just thinking that he's got a 50-50 shot of winning the fight, and people are going to be like so high on Vieira. But there's the fact that the salary does mean something, right? Like that's $400 that you can't necessarily move up another spot in your lineup. And this could be a card where we're short on underdogs that win, so that $400 could be meaningful. So I'm slightly under the field on Vieira and just slightly over the field on Petrosian.
That's got to be a little scary.
Yeah,
36% takedown defense for Armin against an ADCC champion in jiu-jitsu is pretty terrifying. He's going to have to make it a kickboxing at range, which therefore might not score well. So I feel like if there were a trap type of spot on this card, it would be that one in the Vieira type of play. That's probably, sniffing it out. That could be, but he still should. The path of victory is way too strong. And I think he's like plus 140 inside the distance at an underdog price tag. TJ, you playing today or what? We talk you into an ugly Brazilian type of card? I mean, that's really my question to end this show.
Unfortunately, no. I am on NBA Crunch Time after
Smart.
this as the host as well as the producer. So just no can do today. It was a 4-show and 4-article day for me.
Whew, busy day. Hey, next week though, TJ, we got 12 fights, 2 5-round fights, John. It was 13 fights. That's the card to fire on, man. That's going to be a GPP 200,000 plus, I think, the first next week, John.
Yeah. Oh, that's the we lost the John Jones fight. That's right. I didn't even realize it was 2 5-rounders. Oh yeah, so so Aspinall,
New York. Yeah, I can't believe it snuck up on us, right? The typical New York card.
Yeah, exactly. No, that was. I mean, I wish John Jones was still on the card. But
hey, it's a better fight, way better fight. Sergey Pavlovich versus Tom Aspinall. The ownership's going to be 50-50. That's why I think save your pennies, TJ. Next week's going to be the week.
Whatever I win on NBA tonight and NFL tomorrow, that's going straight to UFC next week.
We got it.
When you win that Millie Maker, that's going to be a tough ask.
True.
Final takeaway for you, John, because I actually think we're going to see a score north of 700.
Yeah,
that's not a bold take. That's definitely not a bold take.
No, I think you're right, and so I think it should be a fun fight night. Like some of these can be real duds. This is not going to be one of the ones that's like a dud and where nothing's going on. So I think it'll be a high scoring card. Hopefully just no shenanigans, no hijinks. Just no like medical disqualifications. No like they 6 o'clock comes like, oh, this is the fight that was canceled. Hopefully just no shenanigans.
Yeah, no shenanigans. One last question in our YouTube chat from Jason. Mays versus Dos Santos. Last piece in cash. I think it's terrifying to have a decision between those two. John, thoughts? Because I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I'm actually trying to look up the exact numbers because I think you've got about a 36% chance of a win with Mays and a 26% chance on Dos Santos. It's like I like the idea of like Zaleski. If you only had 7,100, but if you have the money, I would go Mays, just for the win equity.
Win equity, striking competitive nature of it, and Dos Santos could be taken down and stalled out, right, for cash schemes.
Yeah, and there's like just a 10% better chance of actually winning the fight, for that that cheap piece in your cash lineup.
Awesome. Well, like I said, save up some pennies for next week. It's going to be a fun fight card in New York City with 2 title fights. But for Squirrel Patrol and myself and TJ, thank you for producing. We will see you guys next week.